is Brad Massey. I'm the Saunders Foundation Curator of Public History at the Tampa Bay History Center. I think the Jackson House is extremely important because when it comes to the history of Tampa, it's one of the symbols of the African American history of the city. So the Jackson family establishes the house. It's Moses and Sarah Jackson. Right around 1901, it's believed that the house is completed, and it starts off as just a 6-bedroom house that's close to Tampa's Union Station. But what the family decides is that with the prime location that they have, if they add on more rooms, it could function as a boarding house, and it would be a boarding house that would be a family-owned business, and that's an important part of the Jackson House story. And this all happens during the Jim Crow era. The Jim Crow era in the United States is going to run from, roughly the 1880s all the way up into the Civil Rights Acts of the 1960s, particularly the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And of course, what the Jim Crow era is doing in particular is it's attempting to make African Americans second-class citizens. It's creating segregated facilities. And because of Jim Crow, when some of Tampa's big hotels were built, for example, the Floridan Hotel in downtown gets built in 1926, not only can black guests not stay in the hotel, the Floridan Hotel doesn't even hire black workers. So as a landmark, it reminds us of that history, of a Jim Crow time where even well-known black entertainers could not stay in white hotels. It reminds us of a time when black porters and other black businessmen came to town and they had few options. I mean, they could sleep on the streets, they could sleep in the Jackson House. Sometimes you could find what were called black tourist homes that would take in black guests, but there simply wasn't that many hotel options for black visitors.
I'm Dr. Lori Collins, Research Associate Professor and Director at the University of South Florida Libraries. So this is really a partnership between the University of South Florida Libraries and the Tampa Bay History Center, where we're sort of bringing history back to life. And so one of the goals from this research is to be able to present the past to the public. And so we're documenting this structure and its environs, and we're, in a way, kind of creating an interpretive story that we can bring to light and bring this story to life for the general public. So the Jackson House is obviously significant, being on the National Register of Historic Places, and at a community level it holds a lot of significance, but also at the national level, speaking to eras of segregation and a time period that is important for us to nationally look at and understand. We're using a combination of ground-based terrestrial laser scanning, and what that is it uses a laser strategy to range and record distances, and then record also not only the measurement information but the photographic and the texture information from the data that we're collecting around us. So there's some really interesting ways that we approached it in order to sort of bring it to life for the public.
I think the work that Lori and her University of South Florida team is doing is incredibly important because the Jackson House at this particular moment, unfortunately, is not in the best shape. What she's doing is she's creating digital images. So in the worst case scenario, if we happen to lose the house, we have a historic record of what it looked like.
So our team at the University of South Florida Libraries is very active in heritage preservation, management kind of questions globally and locally. And the Jackson House is very important to us. If you think of heritage as sort of an endangered species, if you will. Things can go extinct, things can become endangered, and once they're gone, they're gone. And so it's really important for us to choose imperiled resources or sites that are of particular significance that we can, bring these to the broader public in a much different, more tactile and visible way.
The Jackson House is one of the few remaining symbols from the Jim Crow era in Tampa. The Jackson House is designated as a historic landmark in 2003, and when it's designated, it's the first structure that has ties to the black community that's designated as a historic landmark in Tampa.
The Jackson House, I think, is also an interesting project for us because there's a connection to living people today. There's a voice, an agency, if you will, that can be brought into that project. We've got a family that still very much has a connection to it, and that story is very visceral and still there to be told. And I think anytime that we can combine living voices and connect that back to the past and present a more tangible story to the public, I think is really an exciting thing for us.